Yo, what's going on, everybody? This is your boy Skip, aka Skip and Tosh, here at the Video Game Bang with my main man Cory. Cory, say what's up?
Yo, I'm here and we're in the same room together.
Yeah, go figure. Like
Man.
it happens. Lightning strikes twice, or in this case, it strikes 3 times because we are on House of X number 3 this week, and oh my gosh.
Now it feels like an X-Men book because now we have X-Men. It said in the book we're sending the X-Men to this mission. Yep. So like now we're transitioning from what you said before of being the mutant book till we get our first taste of this incarnation of the X-Men, at least.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, and it was about time. We finally got, Emma Frost as well. Quite a few different things happened, but before we really take a deep dive, a swan dive, a Lara Croft-sized swan dive into this book, we always want to give thanks and love to Oblivion Comics and Coffee. They sponsor this podcast. They provide us with the books to read for this podcast. And oh, hey, there you go. There's a little bit of Curtis right there I can hear. Am I still live? Am I still going?
No, you're good.
I'm good. So thank you, Oblivion Comics and Coffee. Remember that they are in downtown Sacramento, right next to the cathedral. So you can stop in. You can get yourself some coffee, get yourself some comics. Get this comic, obviously.
Highly recommended, this comic.
Highly recommended. And if you mentioned, for all the people watching on Twitch, they see it. For all the people listening on audio, I'm holding up a Video Game Bang sticker. If you mention VGB, if you mention Video Game Bang, I guarantee this is a guarantee, and I assure you that you will get at least, actually it's really only 10% off of your purchase, and they will slide you one of these lovely stickers right chon.
Only 10%. There's no such thing. 10% is a satisfactory discount right there.
Satisfaction guaranteed
for the working man right there, because that's who we are and that's who we care about.
Damn straight. So thanks again to Oblivion Comics and Coffee for sponsoring this show, providing us with this comic that we are going to review for you. And now that all the pleasantries and the promotions are out of the way,
talk to me, Curtis.
Master molds, mother molds, Nimrods. Oh my!
Every book, it's like a new. Like, you got to save these books, and they're going to be an encyclopedia for all the stuff to come. Because if you had a question on what a master mold or a mother mold or a Nimrod is, well, I've known quite a few Nimrods in my day, if you know what I'm saying. But this thing goes through in excruciating detail of exactly the progression of machine, Sentinel to Nimrod, and also and everything in between. So I find all these books educational in like their own way. Like if you didn't quite understand something, or it's a brand new concept that they're breaking down, like this has been really helpful.
Big time. And that's one of the kind of marquee things about Jonathan Hickman is, he comes up with these large, ideas and these very big concepts for books, but along the way he does provide you with everything you need for the story. Not that, I mean, if he just gave away all the answers to you too easy, and it feels too easy, it's not as satisfying. You do have to wait, but along the way he's keeping you entertained, and he's educating you. So everything you need to know from the story is already in the book. Like we've said many times before, and we even told David Webb earlier when we were doing the Video Game Bang podcast, you don't have to have read the last 10 years, 5 years, year, 6 months, 3 months, or anything like that. You don't need all of that information for the continuity. If you have a base level of who some of the key mutants are and some of the key villains are, like Mr. Sinister, Apocalypse, and the Sentinels themselves, Jonathan Hickman will fill in the rest. So this book right here, it got me going in so many different ways. Of course, it all starts off with us returning to Cyclops, and the conversation that was being had with him last time, and some of the Powers of 10 books, and basically a mission, is getting ready to be embarked upon, and straight up, they know about the Orcus Protocol now. How they know about it, I believe we all know, but I'm going to ask Cory that because that's going to be more of a conversational thing as we get on. But if we're just following the sequence of the story, Scott finds out that he's being given a mission by Professor X and Magneto, and he gets a group together, and they pretty much tell him like, hey, not that this is a suicide mission, but this is a mission that could require the price up until your very lives. And Scott answers the call because he's that type of man. They call him Slim. Around this time, like when you were reading this first part of the story, because this is what we get before we get one of the panels that gives us kind of some of the information. How did it hit you? How did, knowing how grave this mission that they were getting ready to embark upon, and then when you saw who was in there, Jean Grey, Nightcrawler, some of those other people, and that their lives could be at risk, how did it hit you, Cory?
I thought it was cool. So I'm operating under the assumption that they're using the information from the last life, Moira's apocalypse run.
I do.
So that's how they know kind of when and where the protocol is going to go live that sets in motion Nimrod. Mm-hmm. I thought it was just a really good panel that kind of brought a few things out for me. Like, I kind of feel like we had Jay Gist in the VGB chat kind of saying that there's some things about Professor X that are just kind of like rubbing him the wrong way, and there might be something fishy there. And I did kind of feel like he was manipulating Cyclops into this task and like offering to calm his mind, and things like that. And I took that as like he could, manually do it with his powers if he wanted to. So I felt like there's a little bit of manipulation going on from Professor X to Cyclops. And I did see that they're taking it very seriously. Like they weren't allowed to bring the Krakoa plants because that would be like a way out. And I think they're sending them off on this mission with like, this is how important it is. There's no backing out. You guys go and have to accomplish it. Giving you a way out might weaken you mentally or, set you off. I don't know. I didn't really care for that too much.
I can speak to that. So first things first, we all have to remember that Cyclops is the lieutenant. He is the guy that when something needs to be done, that's who Professor X goes to, because he trusts Professor X probably more than anybody there, and he will execute that plan to completion more than anything. And when you're talking about a situation where, remember, a mother mold is about to go online, which would produce master molds, which produce sentinels. So if they have this large thing that is the humans, kind of protection against them, then and that thing can wipe out all mutants potentially, then would risking the lives of some of your best people not be within question for something like that?
I do think so, but I think you also give them a way out of it if stuff goes south and a way to, correct course later.
So let's talk about that. So why would they not? Because it kind of got discussed, and they even
there was two parts to it. There was one about being a way out, and then two,
right.
They could then discover Krakoa at that point
and reverse engineer it, and so all you would be doing at that point is kind of the same thing. You would just be delivering a small lamb to slaughter for them to dissect the lamb and then go back to the rest of the herd and then slaughter all the rest of them.
And you gotta stab Moira and try it all over again.
If you can, because she only has 10 lives.
That we know, yeah. It's not right. Like in concrete or in cement.
True, yeah. Destiny mentioned it, but Destiny could be wrong.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? But at the same time, like, if Moira was so convinced and they don't have knowledge beyond that, you kind of have to take her at her word. Yeah. You know what I mean? Because anything beyond that, now you're risking something that, they were sure, and Moira could say, all the other times I did come back, but after that 10th time, if you risked it then you might blow the whole thing apart. Now you have no chance, and it's just not a chance that they're willing to take. The other part is, and we've seen it before, and we're talking about war, and war, like, these are the types of things that get discussed, and these are the types of things that are weighed on a daily basis. Is it worth the lives of these people? Versus the risk and the casualties that could be involved if this thing goes online, if that bomb goes off, if they get this bit of information. It gets that serious. But in addition to that, one thing that people are forgetting, and it really, really makes a big difference, is let's reference a little bit for the people and for ourselves. What were the 3 uses of the Krakoa plant to humans?
One would cure diseases of the mind.
Okay, mental illness, right?
One would extend their lives
for 5 years.
For 5 years.
Right.
And the other would it was like a very powerful penicillin or something like that.
Right, a super antibiotic.
Yeah.
Right. Okay. So now, what were the Krakoa plants good for the mutants?
Ooh, I don't really remember. They haven't really gone too deep into that.
So
right?
they mentioned it. It was it was on the same page.
Yeah.
One was the gateways, and that's one of the biggest reasons why they want the plants. They didn't mention the other thing, which are the biomes, the portable, coverings, the portable shelter. So it was gateways for mutants, biomes, shelter, protection. But the third thing, remember, was the Krakoan tumor.
Oh,
which could not be detected by Krakoa.
Okay, that was the one that seemed like risky, like a cancer.
That's what they said. And remember, everything else was in red. What does red represent? Blood.
Yeah.
Life force. That other one was black.
Yeah.
The Krakoan tumor was black. So in the situation, and as we go through, he has the council of people that is going to go with them, the ones that said, hey, we would go on this mission. And one of the people we didn't mention is Mystique, and he distinctly says, hey, Mystique, are you listening? And remember, she says, I hear you, Summers.
Yeah.
That was not such a reassuring thing. She did not give him I don't have any plants on me, I wouldn't risk it, I know how important this is. She just said, I hear you, Summers. So you already know how my mind's thinking, because I read Jonathan Hickman books. This witch is going to take one anyway, and when they go, if the mission fails, they get that plant, and when they dissect it, they're going to find out about the part about the tumor that Krakoa can't know about. And now they can get back to Krakoa unbeknownst to everybody there and really start some stuff.
The old point of failure.
Single point of failure, as they say in the military. Yeah. So now after that explanation, how do you feel about it? I mean, I'm not trying to change your mind, but I wanted to add some information.
It doesn't change my mind, but it definitely does set up some stuff that, I overall, I really like the book. I'm just saying, I'm just getting some weird vibes from Professor X and Magneto. Like the big line of the book.
Are you getting weird vibes from both of them, or just Professor X?
Both. I feel like they're both being manipulative, like together equally. Like the big line of the book that said in that sequence, and then again at the end, for you to die, you would have to be forgotten,
right? And
no one forgets a founder of a nation,
right?
So I don't know, like, why aren't they a part of this mission too?
Maybe because the kings usually don't go on missions, because if you cut the head off, then the body dies.
Yeah, but this is so important. They're going there. It's like a lot of metal. I think Magneto would be pretty handy there.
I mean, he could be, but at the same time, same thing. Like, Magneto is also an Omega level mutant, and what did they say is the biggest resource of Krakoa?
That's true.
It's Hickman, man. He covers all angles. Trust me, I'm telling you.
No one that they sent was Omega level. Jean wasn't Omega.
Jean is Omega
Phoenix?
Omega level telepath. Phoenix Force is not controlled. Phoenix Force is its own entity, and it was not on the list. But even with that, so they did send one Omega level mutant, but they sent one that, like, okay, if you get that one off, that one is expendable, as opposed to Magneto, who he's a chief. You don't send your chiefs, you send your lieutenants, and that's what they did. They sent their lieutenants. Okay. You can't, like, if it's the big battle, which don't think we're not going to get one.
Yeah, we're only halfway
through. Yeah, that's what I'm saying. But you don't, I mean, even storytelling wise, why would you send off, you know what I mean? Like the biggest thing. Now, I feel you how you say that you believe that you think they're being manipulative. I mean, did we ever stop to think that maybe they're being manipulated?
By who?
Moira? That's what I'm saying. It gets deeper than this. I mean, question everything. I'm not saying don't question Magneto and Professor X. I'm saying question everything.
Yeah.
Anyway, going on.
Yeah.
We move on to the next part, and we do get a panel explaining machines. I'm actually going to rapid fire read this, because I do think this is a part that is pretty interesting. So it's a part talking about machines, Sentinel to Nimrod progression. Sentinel, Alpha, non-sentient, mutant hunting robots based on non-replicating adaptive technology. This is Mark 1 through Mark 8.
These are the big ones from like the cartoons and stuff, the big, square heads and
Bingo.
stuff.
Yep. So everybody knows the Sentinels. And then Master Mold, a replicating, adaptive, fixed or mobile Sentinel factory that is self-aware and capable of creating Sentinel drones. The next one we have is the Mother Mold, a replicating adaptive Sentinel factory that is self-aware and capable of creating master molds. While a master mold is incapable of improving beyond its ultimate Sentinel state, it's theorized that, given enough time, a mother mold is capable of producing purely adaptable machines based on nano-Sentinel technology. And then lastly, an Omega Sentinel, a human infected with nano-Sentinel technology and progressively transformed from human to machine. See Omega Cycle. And then Nimrod at the end. A pure nano-Sentinel construct, anti-mutant, adaptive, self-aware, self-replicating, virtually indestructible.
Yep.
Of course, following on that page, we have the timeline. I'm actually going to rapid fire through this too because these are things that fill in the blanks. So a Nimrod is a Nimrod is an instinct, nanosentinel construct. Moira 10 has learned that while emergent AIs are unavoidable, an anti-mutant Nimrod is not. It is a product of a particular intent, manufactured for a purpose. Moira 10 and Apocalypse theorize that a Nimrod is the primal threat to the long-term survival of mutants. Moira and Apocalypse attempt to acquire the information surrounding Nimrod's origin. Apocalypse acquires the incomplete Nimrod origin files. Nimrod origin files imply the raw developmental/processing power necessary to produce a Nimrod is entirely dependent on a certain technology threshold being reached. A Nimrod almost always occurs in conjunction with or resulting from a mother mold. That was the key thing. So not only could these that's the thing I said to Leak. I was like, these mother moles are probably going to be the things producing the Nimrods. It's not so much the master moles you got to worry about. Master moles is going to kick out more sentinels. Sentinels would be ants compared to Nimrods. Nimrods would be a bunch of Black Widow spiders. Yeah. So that's why it's so important for them to get this mother mold offline immediately, because if they don't, forget producing a bunch of sentinels and mutants have to dealing with that on Krakoa. They're going to produce a bunch of Nimrods and there will be no escape. Mutants will be eradicated. Past that, Nimrod origin files imply we read that part. Moira dies, and then the next part, Moira reincarnates. Moira and Charles Xavier tasked several mutant telepaths with creating a system. I love this part. This is very interesting. A sleeping giant to monitor for Nimrod technological thresholds being reached and or the attempted creation of a mother mold.
I didn't understand that, because why would they need that if they had already found when Nimrod goes online? So what was the point of what we saw in the Powers 3? So
remember that they have to. So they got the information. Now the information wasn't necessarily only when Nimrod went online, but also what they learned through this is that, because it probably didn't say an exact date. It said it's incomplete file. So what it probably said is what the requirements for a Nimrod protocol to even be enacted was. So then from that, he says, okay, well, we got to find out what that can be. So let me take all of the telepaths that I can, and basically I'll create, a network. They got a network monitoring us, and when we kick up to a certain, number or whatever, then Mother Mold will go online. Well, same thing for this. What we'll do is we'll create a counter network. We'll monitor, we'll spy on their spies. And when we see that it's getting close to that point, now I know when to send Scott and the guys to go take it offline, because I'm not going to risk their lives a second earlier.
Yeah.
Lastly, Nimrod, Moira and Charles Xavier tasked several. We read that part. Orcus protocol enacted. And just as it told us, that was the first or second issue was talking about the Orcus protocol. So that's been enacted. Moira and Charles Xavier discovers Orcus through Sleeping Giant. Charles Xavier and Magneto acquire the plans for the Orcus Forge, Soul's Hammer, home of a dormant but soon to be active Mother Mold. And lastly, Charles Xavier and Magneto task the X-Men. That was the first mention.
Yeah.
With destroying the Mother Mold and preventing the creation of Nimrod.
So that sets up everything we've seen before. That's kind of the main plot right now. But then they kind of send us on a little side step, which is kind of cool.
I liked it.
It's basically at Achilles, which is a Supermax facility for superhumans.
What's the story of Achilles before we go any further? Ancient Greek. Tell me about Achilles.
Oh, man. All I know is something about his heel.
Okay, cool.
He has one single point of, he gets his legs chopped out from under him, basically.
He has one single point of failure. Achilles is indestructible across his whole body except for
his heel.
Yeah. Single point of failure. No coincidences here.
So we get here. They kind of give us a little rundown of it. It's kind of a sham court session. He has this really nervous, kind of comical public defender. It looks like.
That dude that's stammering and stuttering.
Yeah, stammering and stuttering, while he's just total boss. Can easily rip all these guys apart.
Now, who is he?
In his change, Sabretooth.
There we go.
So this is picking up where we left off. We saw him get captured by the Fantastic Four.
Right.
Scott said, we'll come get him when we're ready. Mm-hmm. And so he's in this, in the trial process. He knows, he doesn't seem too worried. He's not sweating. He's still just being typical Sabretooth. And he sniffs the air, and here we get, finally, after we were talking about not seeing her yet from last week, we get our... Am I blanking on her name? I'm looking at her face.
Her first name is a part of this podcast.
Emma Skies shows up.
Hey, Emma Skies should cosplay as Emma Frost.
Emma Frost.
She would kill it. Mm-hmm.
Emma Frost comes up with those two girls who we saw were with Magneto before.
Right.
And they're calling her mom.
Mm-hmm.
So, and we can tell they had like telepathy powers. So maybe they are legit daughters, or offshoots of her somehow.
They could be part of the Chimera, the Mr. Sinister project where he was taking DNA from different mutants, like he took.
Do we know that exists in this reality yet, though? We know that was in Moira's last life, or Moira 10's life.
The only thing I could assume is that if they're taking all of the information that they know, that they probably still did do it, but they did it in a way where it wouldn't be a point of failure, and they created even better Chimera.
So yeah, we still don't know a lot about these. I'm sure we'll find out here pretty soon. But basically, she comes out and she lays down the law. I can't remember what exactly she was saying.
Diplomatic immunity. She says, being that we're getting ready to be recognized as a sovereign state, any mutants who were both born within the U.S. or outside of it are now citizens of Krakoa. And with that being said, they all have access to diplomatic immunity. Basically,
regardless of what they do.
Regardless of what they do.
He was there for killing dudes.
Right, exactly. Straight up killing people, breaking into a facility, a high security facility, which, obviously the higher security, the more secretive it is, so the higher penalty would be when you go to a court of law. But in this particular case, she comes in and she basically forces their hand in one of the dopest ways. This is good Hickman writing, basically saying, hey, we are a sovereign nation now. This is all starting. You guys don't want to start off on the bad foot by, basically violating our diplomatic immunity. So go ahead and hand them over. More or less saying, if you don't respect what we're saying right now and we're a new sovereign nation, that would be an act of war.
Yeah. And basically to sum it up, she says, and from this day forward, mutants won't be judged in human courts or by the likes of you. So straight up, basically no matter what any mutant does, I think she says it in the other one too, like, he's a monster, but he's our monster, and we'll deal with him, the way that we see fit.
Correct.
And so it's pretty stone cold, man. They're basically kind of what Magneto had said. They're the new gods, so if they show up and smite a few of you, like, you can't really do anything about it.
Nah, and especially when your new gods are offering you, things to benefit you, offering you additional 5 years of life, offering you a super antibiotic and as well as a pill to cure all mental illness, which is, a real big thing that we're learning about more and more every day. My favorite part of the scene was when the lady who basically was the district attorney, in an attempt to try and convict Sabretooth, when she pulls out the gun right in front of Emma Frost and is like, no, this is not how today ends. Not on my watch. And Emma Frost says, normally I'd dominate that little mind of yours and make you stick that gun where your last boyfriend left you. But I've been told the art of diplomacy is about equalizing power dynamics. So why don't you pretend that some larger American purpose is being served here today? And I'll pretend like you could have stopped me.
Damn.
Hickman, bro.
That was good.
Real good.
That was Tarantino right there. That was Sam Jackson.
Yes, it was.
You look into that bag and pull out the one that says "bad motherfucker"
on it. Yeah. Calm down, honey bunny. Anywho, so along with that, we go to another panel. We won't speak over this one too much, but it basically just talks about the state of transitioning from human to an Omega Sentinel. And I love the fact that it breaks it up, classic Hickman, and then it's the Omega symbol. And naturally, if I'm thinking Omega level mutants are the largest resource within Krakoa, then I'm thinking an Omega Sentinel would be one of the highest things that could test the metal of such a thing.
Yeah.
So, Hickman just planting seeds, Krakoa seeds, planting seeds. We move over to that, over into the Orcus Forge, where we see the Mother Mold there in the middle, and obviously everybody's operating around it.
So this is where I'll need some a little breakdown.
Sure.
Who are those two women that are together? That are the bad guys.
The two women together. One of them is Karima, who we saw in House of X #1. She was the one where they first went to the forge and they got out. She was, the bald-headed one.
Gotcha. Okay.
Yeah.
That's why she looked familiar.
Right. And she's an Omega Sentinel.
Oh, wow. Okay.
Yeah.
I didn't put that together.
Right. And then the other one is
At this time? She's Omega Sentinel?
She is currently Omega. She's been Omega since we've seen her.
Oh, wow. Okay.
Yeah. And then the other one is that doctor, and I forget her name. They say it in here, but she's the doctor that wrote the paper stating that initially we thought mutation within humans would get to this point by this time, but really, if it wasn't for the effects of post House of M, where no more mutants and the population got greatly reduced,
that saved us,
right?
Basically.
That bought us time. That bought mankind time that they didn't know that they had. So if that had not happened, mutants would actually already outnumber human beings.
Yeah. So they're working with the state of urgency.
Oh yeah.
To get this thing online. It becomes clear, they lay a little bit of groundwork. That's probably the part where I was like skimming through the fastest because I was trying to cram before we did the show.
Right.
So that was the kind that didn't make the most sense. But then this is where we get our superhero entrance when, you got the guys at the computer saying, "Oh my God, we've got incoming." And you get the X-Jet flying through space towards the mother mold.
Absolutely. I mean, basically all that was being said there, I know you kind of rushed through it, but it's just talking about, they were basically just breaking down how a mother mold produces master molds. And and they were talking about like controlling it, because they're like, the second that you lose control of that, it could go from the, because mutants are still, they have a human base. So if you lost control of the Sentinels, and then eventually after they eradicate all the X-Men, then they start looking for the next thing to eradicate, because they go from being Sentinels to sentient.
Yeah. And
then now it's just trying to eradicate everything. And that's why Karima was saying there won't even be, little pink fleshy parts anywhere, at all. And then the doctor was talking about how there's a fail-safe, hey, if for whatever reason things go out of control, this protocol will enact, and it will start blasting the mother mold directly into the sun, and then she'll be destroyed essentially. And Karima, and it's funny, Karima of all people is like, are you sure that's what you want to lean on? And then from there, that's when the people inside of the ship, the security who's looking out, realizes that the Blackbird is on their way. The X-Men are en route.
Yeah, and so they immediately start trying to figure out like what they're going to do, because they feel caught off guard, obviously. How could they know? There must be someone in here talking, leaking information. Little do they know the stuff. We actually know more than some characters in this book for once in this damn storyline.
Yeah.
And so they enact some sort of protocol where a bunch of Sentinels are going to, get there eventually, but not in enough time. So they're trying to figure out basically how to mitigate the damage, because they realize they're kind of screwed. Like before, we learned that there's like 3,000 people on this. What do you want to call it? The mother.
The forge.
The
yeah,
forge,
I mean it's basically a spacecraft, and I think that's the max capacity is 3,000, so they can have up to 3,000.
So they're assuming the X-Men are still trying to get through with as few casualties as possible.
Yep. But
they realize that there's just a lot of normal people on there, so it's not really much of a fight unless these Sentinels get there on time. So they send Nightcrawler to do a little bit of scouting, which I thought was cool. We get a little BAMF action for the first time in the series. He goes through, runs into them real quick. So basically there's like 4 points in this in the forge where they have like a fail component where they get in there. It's basically what they were telling us about, like how to destroy it and run it into the sun, basically. So he already knows where it's at. He's just teleporting to those specific locations just to make sure it's where they think it's going to be before they actually board and take care of business. And he kind of runs into them, who happen to be at one,
right?
Because that's what they were just talking about.
Mm-hmm.
And then they know what their plan is at that point.
Absolutely. And I liked some of the emotional beats and the emotional investment that we got put into it, because we see the doctor that had discovered the time frame that humans actually have to work with. You see her speaking to her husband, who is also an employee on that ship. He's part of security. And right as the Blackbird lands on the forge itself, he just happens to be right there, right below them. And he pretty much says it. And this is the interesting part. As much as, we were talking about earlier, risking the lives of these people, and maybe they're being manipulated and maybe not. But I would go as far as to say, in my personal opinion, I feel like that was a little bit more on the side of encouragement, because that was closer to a speech that you would give soldiers getting ready to go into a war than anything else. But along with that, Scott was dedicated to see it through up until his very death. Oddly enough, he lands the ship right on top of another person who has the same amount of resolve. Like, we will see this through, even if I have to risk my life, because I don't want the life of my fellow humans to be eradicated by whatever the mutants and Xavier and Magneto might be up to. And sure enough, he pretty much starts talking to his wife, and I love the way the conversation went. He just treated it like it was any other old day. Oh, honey, unfortunately, I won't be making it back today, and all that other stuff. And ultimately, he decides that, the only way for this to go in our direction is if he plants some explosives and he detonates it. And sure enough, he starts saying his goodbyes, and he even told his wife, I really do wish that we had kids, even though it's getting ready to end like this, essentially, even though they would be parentless with, this time, or at least fatherless. I do wish that we got to experience that together. And he ends the relationship in his own life by blowing up the ship, his own aircraft with the X-Men right over top of him. And that is the very last panel. We see the Blackbird itself starting to detonate, with some of the larger Ford ship detonating right below it.
Yep, be strong, love, don't let them win. His last words before he clicked the button, and then all we see is an explosion panel. So they left us on a nice, juicy little cliffhanger this week.
Yes, they did. And I mean, perfect way to end it. You want to be invested in the next thing. I definitely felt like we got more than enough story progression, more than enough information to kind of fill us in around and kind of get us prepped for the next part, because we are officially 50% through. We've had 3 issues of Powers of 10. This is our 3rd issue of House of X, so we are officially 50% through.
I didn't even realize that. And we are going back to that little stagger, because we had 2 Powers of X back to back for the last 2 issues, and this time we're getting 2 House of X's back to back before we go back to Powers number 4.
This is true.
So, are we expecting them to pick up right where they left off, or do you think we're doing more time jumps and life jumps? They're not even really time jumps; they're life jumps.
Hard to say. But before we do, I want to read the last thing, the very last panel in here, and it was actually Krakoan. Upon arriving for the first time to the mutant nation state of Krakoa, a resident telepath will imprint the Krakoan language into the mind of the newly arrived mutant. Once this is done, that mutant is capable of reading, speaking, and fully understanding the Krakoan language. Krakoan was created by Douglas Ramsey to be mutantdom's first autochthonous language. I hope I said that right. It's important to note that Krakoan is a manufactured language and not the native language of Krakoa, the living mutant island. The language of Krakoa is untranslatable, and almost all human/mutant brains are incapable of comprehending it. The only known exception is the mutant cipher. And then we get a list of the Krakoan alphabet, our alphabet really being translated into Krakoan. And what's interesting about that is I'm jumping back to Powers of 10, number 3, when you and I were talking about it. I was like, who's that character again? And you're like, oh, that's Krakoa.
The tree.
Well, it is Krakoa, but it's also Cypher, because they've merged.
Yeah.
And we talked about that.
Mm-hmm.
So it's bringing that up again. And then with that realization, it's apparent that something happens while all this goes down. Now we can start having a little bit more conversation, and we're talking about speculation. I'm sure there's going to be time jumps still, because Powers of 10 pretty much deals with 4 different timelines directly. It deals with 10th to the 0 power, which is year 1, 10th to the 1st power, which is year 10, 10 to the 3rd power, which is year 100, and then 10 to the 4th power, which is year 1000. So it deals with those 4 different ones. And within that one, obviously, we saw Krakoa and Cypher. So within this timeline, like I said, that single point of failure, I believe Mystique took a flower anyway. She didn't really guarantee Cyclops. She didn't really, it was too on the nose that she was like, whatever, Summers, I hear you.
Yeah.
And also, out of all the people that went on the mission with them, she's easily the least trustworthy.
Yeah.
She's screwed over the Brotherhood of Mutants and Magneto himself. She's obviously screwed over the X-Men multiple times. She's pretty much screwed over everybody, because she's kind of got that survival thing going on. I am under the impression that she does take a flower with her, or at least some seeds. I'm under the impression that things go wrong there. Obviously, we see things go wrong. Yeah. We just don't know how wrong they go.
Things already went wrong.
Right. I'm under the impression that those seeds or flowers are their hands. Someone does get their hands on them. And it did show that was one of the parts we didn't talk about, because they were talking about, hey, well, what about all the extra help that's not on the forge, that's on that planet, getting metal for us to continue to complete the forge. She was like, they've been called back, and we got to try to hold off the X-Men as long as we can, so that help can come back and help us defeat them. I think, obviously, with what goes wrong, I think they do. I think the Sentinels end up coming. I wouldn't be surprised if all of, or at least a large portion of these X-Men get killed and wiped out, and they get those hands on those seeds. Nimrod goes online, and Nimrod runs the calculations and finds, oh, all of these uses, and then there's the tumor. That's how we'll hit them. We'll get inside of Krakoa. That's the only way they won't see him coming, is if they use that, and we'll get inside and we'll tear up. And I think the failure occurs, and that's when they get desperate in Krakoa, or Cypher realizes that he needs to bond with Krakoa, and he talks to Krakoa. Krakoa talks back because they understand, and then that's the only way that Krakoa can survive, is if it consolidates itself.
You're going far into this. You're going to the resolution.
Let's go.
I don't know. I can't even think that far ahead. I'm not adept at this writer's style yet, so it's hard for me to tell where it's going. I think that is a super good theory you have, and it's almost 99% going to happen that Mystique did sneak some technology in there that's going to maybe save her ass.
Right, because what did I call her? I called her a survivor.
Yeah.
So a survivor's getting ready to go on a mission where there's no way to survive.
Or guaranteed.
She's taking a damn flower, or at least some seeds.
Yeah. That's a good theory, man. I see that happening. I think the book is not dropping any of its steam. I'm super excited to see the next issue. I think overall this one just fits right along. I like it better. I think I'm really just liking House of X a little bit better than Powers.
Sure.
But like, you can't have one without the other. They're 100%, intertwined. So there's yet to be a bad book, and this is just the next really good one. I really enjoyed it. I hope to see more of, like, I love the politics stuff. So that's why I think of the whole book, I really did enjoy that Sabretooth scene a lot. So I hope we're going to be getting some more of that, just kind of domestic situations that are going on. I hope we see the Fantastic Four be like, hey, what's going on?
See,
and pull these guys in.
I was about to say, that's going to happen, because that's the next thing. Okay, so we just brought him in, and we needed to know what he was taking, and they just walk in and take him away.
Yeah.
Reed's going to be like, I'm going to go talk to them. And Reed's going to try to go, and Reed better not mess around and take his son with him, because his son might not be leaving with him.
Oh, man. Yeah, I'm excited, man. I don't know what's going on, but I just know next Wednesday I'm going to have this book in my hot little hands, and we're going to be seeing what's going down in Krakoa.
Big time. So once again, thank you to Oblivion Comics and Coffee for sponsoring this podcast and providing us with this book so we can review it for you. Again, when you visit Oblivion Comics and Coffee, because you're hearing my voice and it's very suggestive, so you will go visit them, even if you're on the other side of the world. When you go in, mention Video Game Bang, mention VGB. For the people watching on Twitch, they will slide you one of these stickers. And for the people that are listening and the people that are watching, they will discount your purchase 10%, with the exception of alcohol. So go in there and get yourself some tea to start your day. Get yourself some coffee. They have hot food as well. And it's obvious the number one thing you need to walk out with is this comic book, because it's not dropping steam. It is setting up the framework for mutants to return to the MCU, and for the X-Men, as well as likely the Fantastic Four to enter as well. So continue to read this book, continue to tune into this podcast where you see Cory and I break it down, and make sure that you also tune in to the Video Game Bang podcast. You can catch us on everywhere where podcasts are available pretty much, and make sure that you go to twitch.tv /videogame_bang so you can watch us live, because we do it live, just like Bill
Doing it live.
Anyway, for Cory Vincent, my name is Skip, aka Skip and Tosh. Y'all have a great night.